Good day everyone, this is Enraged Eggplant and welcome to Dungeons and GURPS. In this video I would like to discuss why one should or should not play D&D in GURPS. If you're new here, GURPS is a generic universal role-playing system, published by Steve Jackson Games. It has gotten something of a bad reputation that is mostly based on basically just some silly memes. Of course, it is not a perfect system, but it is functional and not at all as complex as the memes would tell you. I think a better title for this video would be Why do I play D&D in GURPS? If you are aware of my blog, you probably know that I am mostly preoccupied with porting all kinds of D&D content to GURPS. Why do I do that instead of just playing D&D? And why do that when GURPS already has a Dungeon Fantasy line and even DF RPG? I'll try to divulge my thoughts on this matter. When people think of D&D, keep in mind that I started with the 3rd edition, they usually think of a hack-and-slash dungeon crawling game. I don't think I've ever played a D&D game that was strictly dungeon crawling focused. There was always a plot, social encounters, various NPCs to interact with. It wasn't always only about combat. However, all the non-combat stuff was poorly supported mechanically, but you could still roleplay it all. What I liked about D&D the most was a vast amount of lore and character options. When you read a D&D book, your mind always concocts various situations, encounters, plot lines or ways to weave something into the world. Then you realize that it's all very gamified. As soon as you reach a certain level, hordes of orcs stop being a threat. Taking on a dragon stops being an undertaking that requires careful planning and a lot of resources. Various minor abilities become useless, and the world suddenly feels much less magical, evocative and believable. I remember the first time I read D&D 5e Player's Handbook. My reaction was, why did they do that? Why would I play this dross? The absolute lack of options and customization took out half the fun for me. I still gave it a shot once just to see that maybe it plays better than it seems, and it kind of was even worse than I expected. During my D&D career, I've been browsing all kinds of role-playing forums. Apparently, most of the games belong to two types: core only, why would one limit the options like that? And anything goes. The latter meant that anything published by Wizards of the Coast was fair play, but of course the DM had to veto absurd stuff. Nevertheless, there were many people who would create absolutely broken characters as thought experiments, but some would even try to play them and hope that the DM does not notice that and let them win the game. And such people exist in GURPS community too. This entire mindset of you have to know this system well to be able to notice exploits that the players can come up with from a mile away created something of a mistrust of all things unofficial. Homebrew and third-party material was frowned upon, even though official material sometimes had much more broken stuff, but at least it was familiar. People just did not know how new things would interact with the old things and couldn't be bothered to learn, so the immediate reaction to homebrew material usually was negative. When I was starting out with GURPS, I was positively surprised by the number of options. I would, for example, read GURPS Psionic Powers to understand how psionics work in GURPS. I would read GURPS Magic and understand how magic works in GURPS. Only when I read through GURPS Powers and GURPS Thaumatology, I understood the most important thing about the system, and the system itself just clicked in my mind. Everything works the way you want it to work. This is why the frequent questions I see online such as how does magic work in GURPS? How does psionics work in GURPS? How do spirits work in GURPS? How do dragons work in GURPS? Just make no sense to me. Everything works the way you want it to work, Isn't that great? Remember how you might have wanted to change something about D&D but couldn't? Now you can create your perfect system, the one that meets all your expectations, the one that allows a world to make sense to you. Basically, no GURPS game is the same, because every GM does things differently. You're not supposed to strictly follow a certain template that some people expect to see in the GURPS box. GURPS is a toolkit that lets you create your own system for your own needs. GURPS Dungeon Fantasy is not my thing, not only because of the templates, basic magic, but also because of its strict dungeoneering focus. If that's your thing, go ahead and enjoy some DF! If you grew up reading Forgotten Realms novels, but the actual system prevented you from imitating these stories due to its mechanics, now you can. Weren't content with a subpar support for non-combat activities? Now you can have anything you want. Overall, it all depends on what you like and do not like, and what kind of game you are looking for. So basically, GURPS is the perfect D&D for me. I created a setting where I managed to incorporate all the various lore that I've read in the D&D books. But not only D&D 3.5. I can take content from AD&D, D&D 4e, 5e, Pathfinder and literally anything else, and port it over to GURPS. And it will make sense and seem natural. I've had gigabytes of third-party supplements for D&D that I have never had a chance to use, because some of the very cool ideas were implemented abysmally. But now I can. Sure, it turned my setting into a kitchen sink, but that was the intention. I know that nowadays kitchen sinks are stigmatized, because the modern trend is no, you must have no more than 4 races in your game, and no elves, they are too cliché and overused. But I find that the diversity of options to be very believable. Just look at the real world. However, all the aforementioned means that it's more difficult for a GURPS GM to find players, because not everyone will share his vision. Also, creating the game framework that satisfies you will take a lot of work. You cannot just wave a magic wand and get your perfect game. But if you put some effort into this undertaking, I'm sure it will be worth it. And honestly, I find all the work I do very fun by itself. And that's it for the introduction video. I hope that was helpful. In the future videos, I will explore some D&D concepts and how I made them work in GURPS. Not everything might work for you, but some things or ideas might still be helpful. I will provide you with the mechanical justifications and will explain my thought process, because one of the most important things is to get into the mindset of GURPS. Everything works the way you want it to work. You have no limits at all. See ya!